What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Sublimely Elegant here as always, and welcome to another Doom Builder 2 tutorial. This one's a bit tricky, and it's not going to be as much of an involved tutorial as it is just something that I feel I need to say. A user had commented on one of my videos that the tutorials were helpful, and I'm glad that they are, and it seems that a lot of people are actually getting a lot of use out of them. But he or she had an issue with just actually starting building a level, figuring out, where, what steps to do to create something. And again, I'm going to reference one of my first, more successful maps, this one here, in order to possibly give you a bit of an idea as to some ways that we could possibly figure out what that might be, and it's going to be different for everybody. But I'll start off by saying that this also kind of falls into the science of level design. In fact, it really does. And as I've already had that video out, this will be a part 2 to that video, because it is something that needs to be said, and I don't think I actually covered this part of it, which was kind of stupid of me, because it's a pretty important one. Where do you start? For example, on how I started this, to give you guys one possible way. When I had started this level, of course you always start, with just a room and build off of that in what way you prefer, but if I had to break down the way that I started this level, I would say that it was a lot of failed levels. A lot of it was trying something out, not going too terribly detailed with it, but getting a basic concept of the shape, and working off that. But keep in mind, I didn't do that for all of this level either. This level, when it first started, did not have outside areas at all, and many of these rooms that are here weren't created. It was just 2-3 rooms, and I built off that based off of, creative ideas and, other ideas from failed levels that I had had previously. Kind of like using the sort of countertop sort of area to keep people behind, which I actually am using as a starting point to make the initial room easier in our live level belligerent cats. So this level didn't start out, with everything. I just kind of added to it over time. And even that doesn't seem satisfactory of an explanation to me, because it's so vague. It's so very vague. And that's why I've actually been having a great deal of trouble actually trying to think of what exactly I want to say for this video. But I believe that we can go about it a certain way that might be helpful. And this is what I've thought of. After examining this level for a great deal and some research on the internet, I have managed to come about the idea that this really isn't all that complex of a map. It looks complex, it feels complex when you're playing it, it seems like it's absolutely huge when you're playing it in relation to the player's size, but in relation even to the player's size, it's not that huge. And that's something that had to dawn on me after, just kind of sitting back and just looking at this level and thinking, what could I have done to get to this level's point where it's at faster? What would be a good step to follow? Where would I start to do something like this? And here's what I've realized is that these rooms, there's not that many, they're not that big, and they're not that complex. They're just detailed. If I were to segregate this into different rooms, and I'm going to go ahead and draw on the screen here. This should work, I believe. Does it? Yes, it does. If I was to segregate this level into its separate rooms to kind of figure out exactly what it really is, clearly we have our first room as the starting area. I would say that this room is a separate room, as well as this part. This section here would be a separate room, as is this. This area is a separate room as well, as this, this, the outside areas, and then lastly the exit. So now that we've broken this up into what the rooms more or less are, we can actually see that there's not that much going on. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 rooms that actually comprise this map. 11 rooms. That's really it. It's 11 rooms. Yet it does this. It looks like this, and it plays decently enough that it's what I would call a successful map. And it's only made of 11 rooms. It seems hard to think that that's actually accurate, in a way. I mean, it's obviously accurate, as I just drew on the screen where the rooms in and of themselves are. It is, in fact, 11 rooms. But it just doesn't feel right. It feels like there's more. It feels like there's a lot going on, and I think that has a lot to do with detail. Much of it has to do with detail. And even then, a lot of these rooms are pretty bland, but if I turn full brightness off, you'll see that most of the bland rooms are actually the darker areas. The areas where the player can't see as much, I lax on actually putting detail in that area. If something is illuminated, such as this room, I've got multiple computer screens and a secret, and there's different textures and bezels on the side and lighting and angles. There's a lot of detail in this room, but when we go over to this dark room here, it's a flat texture in a small boxed off area. It's not that detailed. And I think that might be something to actually consider when you are constructing parts of these rooms. But all of this information is fine and dandy, but it doesn't really help in the notion of where do I start? And I think, based off of the information that we've just covered, how little this map really is, and yet it feels like so much, the best way to honestly start, more than likely, and as opposed to the commenter actually said, might just be to wing it. That honestly might be the best way. And a way that I would wing it that makes sense would actually be to just sit down and draw. Draw very basic shapes. Don't give any detail or anything such as that. Don't connect anything. Just places where you would put rooms. Try to imagine what the rooms would be. I would say that this area here, the initial piece here, would be a starting area. And then there could be a door to the side to a hallway with, you know, another door that leads to a shipping crate area where there's monsters scattered about and it's dark, and a red keyed door here that could lead to an upstairs area over here that can look outside through a window, which would show the player that they could possibly get there, possibly through a secret door somewhere over here that would just lead to the outside area. And then once you figured that out, you'd have a nice set of ammunition and stuff, and you'd be sitting pretty. Then make your way to yet another door that could be over here, maybe triggered by a switch, and once you've gotten that done, then you can exit. I don't know. It's really difficult to say, but I think doing it this way might be one of the better ways to do it, because all you need is a shape. Once you've made this shape, I would say the next step, and this is all personal preference as well, and I've never done it this way. I will say that this is something that I'm just kind of experimenting with, because I do want to answer this question, but the way that I map, I don't feel answers that question well enough, because I do a lot of improvising and a lot of on-the-spot thinking when it comes to my map designs, and I think that that's actually a part of a large reason that I'm having such trouble doing the level live series. I'm under a lot of, as I said before, I'm under a lot of pressure to try my best to make this design really well. And doing it live poses a hurdle for me. But doing it this way for you might be a possibility. It might be a prospect to look into. Once you've set up this way, there are two ways that I see you going about it. Take the shape that you have here, start adding your little details, refine it, connect things with doors, and, you know, put in ceiling lights and beams. That could be one way. Or, if you would prefer, try to sit back, visualize this space that you've just created without any detail, just blank rooms, no player starts, no nothing. Just try to visualize it, and then just start a new map with this shape in mind, and then just detail as you go through. And perhaps, while you're creating these rooms that you've already pre-conceptualized through the Doom Builder, it's more than likely possible you'll think of other neat things. Because you've got, at this point, you have an idea of where you're starting and where you're ending. You're going to know where you might want the player to pause for a moment, where you want to give them a little bit of a challenge, a hurdle with more monsters, or lack of ammo. And based off that, you can position your doors with keys properly throughout the map, and then from there you're figuring out where you want those keys. Perhaps you want the keys in an entire different room. Oh, well, how will we get there? Perhaps just make a room here, you know? Maybe that's a way to go about it. It seems like a solid enough kind of idea. The concept in my mind makes a good deal of sense. But again, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody that would think this way. So I'm not entirely certain that that would be perfect for everybody. I'm sure this idea will blow some people's minds, and they'll go on to make amazing maps and be talked about among all the forums for quite a while. I'm not one of those people. I pop in now and then. I do have fairly good concept. It's execution that becomes difficult, and I think that difficulty comes to everybody, especially if you're starting off. More so if you're starting off, in fact. If we were to go back to my other map here, the first rooms that I had actually started off with this map was this room and this room. For a great deal of time, all I had available were those two rooms. I didn't have the section that was right here. I didn't have this secret. There was no door to go outside there. There was no secret here. This didn't exist. This secret wasn't here. All of this was nothing but a blur. Not even a concept in my mind while I was designing these two rooms. The next room that I had come up with was then the area inside of the wall, which would lead to the blue key, which then led me to just having a small room here to start with. As you probably may have seen, I did originally have a door here. And once I had figured that out, I had to actually figure out a bit more of the details. I took a step back once I had the basic designs, and I asked myself, how do I want this room to be accessible? Because in this particular scenario, I don't want it so that the player could simply go in here, go through, get the blue key, and immediately progress. I wanted to make a challenge, a point in the map immediately, where the player would actually have to figure out a puzzle in order to continue the map. In order to do this, it required I make another room. And while this was originally just a room with some switches, I eventually put the wall up and said, I want to make that a bit more difficult. That's still too easy. It's just a switch out in the open. What's the point of the switch opening the door other than wasting 5 seconds of the player's time? There wasn't. So I created this a situation where this line here actually opens the door temporarily, creating a puzzle for the player. Even once they've cleared out all of the monsters in this room, the player cannot go anywhere. At least not safely. They could still go outside. But the player cannot go anywhere safely without figuring out how this puzzle works. And crossing the line, you'll hear the noise. You may even turn around and see the door lower for a second. And eventually it would click in the player's head that, oh, I need to run through as fast as possible in order to complete the switches to get back out and allow me to progress to the blue key, which then led here to where I had to conceptualize new doors. So you can kind of see just how much thought that I went through for just having so few rooms. And for every room, I tried to pose a new challenge. And I think that might be the end of the day story for this type of predicament where you're trying to figure out how do you start a map. Every room should have a purpose. A keyword should. Not all of them will. But think of the reason that a player is actually using your map. Why are they playing your map? Well, there are several reasons we can come up with. It could be for fun. They could just enjoy the game, want to play through, have little, entertainment. Maybe they just really want to shoot things. That's fine too. But the third reason is a bit better. And I think it's mostly the reason that people still play this game today. And I think that that has to do with every room being a challenge. Every room poses the player with a hurdle. Aside from the start room, I suppose, but even that can if you're really cynical. When the player gets to this initial room, their hurdle is monsters. They have to deal with the monsters. At the same time, they also have the hurdle that I've imposed on them via these barrels here. They actually now have to be careful to not shoot the barrels if they're too near, trying to fight all of these monsters. Well, 5. These ones are hidden for the time being, but while they're trying to fight these monsters, there are a ton of barrels around. If those get nicked either by a monster or the player, they'll all explode, and the player has a solid chance of dying and have to start over. So I've posed a great hurdle where the player is not only just being attacked, but I'm focusing on their dexterity. I'm forcing them to say, take a moment, count your shots. Don't just go in gun blazing, or else you're gonna blow your face off. That is the first hurdle that I've provided to the player. The second one would be figuring out the puzzle. Once the puzzle is complete, the next hurdle is then getting through the array of monsters, of course, but also with a trap. Something that the player would be surprised by. They're feeling good, they've gotten this far, going through the hallway, and then, bam, more monsters. At the same time, I've given them a shotgun to deal with those monsters, but I am giving them a surprise. This will help keep the player on their toes. After they've encountered that surprise, they would go on and find the blue key. Ah, yes, glorious. Another surprise. More challenges. Getting the blue key wasn't as simple as walking in and killing some monsters. There was a fright to it. There was a genuine scaredness. The area is cramped. They're having, it's claustrophobic. And monsters are popping out of the walls. How do you deal with that? That is the I believe, third challenge that I've presented the player. Once they've completed that, they would have to go through the doors and, of course, deal with monsters. And more monsters. And, oh, that's a Baron of Hell. That is the fourth challenge I've presented the player. There are monsters here, yes, but nothing too difficult. It's just rooms holding people. Except one of those people is particularly strong people. The player is now faced with, I believe is the fifth challenge. I'm losing count here. I'm trying my best to help out, and hopefully this all helps. But the player's fifth challenge is now a stronger monster, something that they actually need to take a step back, say, whoa, deal with it properly, not, again, running in. You want to make the player be a little bit more tactile, be scared, give them something of a challenge. Once they've figured out that and destroyed the Baron of Hell, they can go up the stairs, hit a switch, and another challenge is a surprise of a plethora of monsters, and then providing them with a little bit of relief, health and ammo, something that the players love. From there, they'll be going outside. The general challenge of the outside is simply kill the monsters, get to the other side, and get the yellow key. And then from there, their next challenge is to deal with all the monsters here in order to be safe enough to press the switch. On this one, it's a bit more iffy. The switch can simply be pressed and ran out of the room quite reasonably, actually. But that's up to the player. I'm providing them a challenge of monsters in order to safely hit the switch, but they can choose to just simply run and press the switch and ignore the people should they want to. Most players normally wouldn't, unless you're speed running, and most people don't speed run custom maps, as you can't really have a world record for something of that sort, as far as I know. Once they've entered into the other side of the outside to get the red key, which the switch was enabling them to do, they will be faced with, again, more monsters and another take a step back. There's a revenant here in order to slow the player down. and keep them on their toes. Once they've collected the red key, their next challenge is this secret here has opened up. What are they going to do about it? Another surprise to the player in order to keep them on their toes. From there, you can simply make your way through the maze to the exit. Most rooms in this map have challenges. Most rooms in this map present the player with something that they need to either use enough brute force to deal with, or a little bit of wit. And I think wit is probably one of the better ones. If you have a level where the player needs to have a sign of intelligence, and that player can complete that level, that is a very rewarding feeling. So much more rewarding than actually just killing 100 monsters to press the switch on the other end of a hallway. Because if you don't have mazes and you don't have puzzles, surprises, and all that, your level may as well be a hallway with all of the items in front of the player immediately, all of the monsters in front of them, and an exit switch simply on the other end. Yeah, that would still be challenging, but that loses its sense of being compelling. At least that's how I've rationalized it. I hope that this little chat has been able to bring about some interesting ideas, and even if you don't take what I say 100%, I at least hope that some things that I've said have kind of clicked in your mind, and you've been able to create your own concept of, you know, why the things they are the way they are in each and every map that would be deemed good. And I think the way that I've explained it does work fairly well, if not a bit lengthy. But again, as I had said in the first part of the science of level design, this is something that I'm not completely good at. And it's called the science of level design because it really is a science. A lot of depth goes into beyond the idea of just make walls, put monsters, have fun. There's a lot more to it. It really is a science. A science that to this day people don't actually fully understand even. I could understand more of it personally, but nobody really understands it completely. At least not to my knowledge. New games are always coming out, new games are always having different ways of doing it. And that's their way of trying to take a twist on the science of level design to see just how far it can go, and what exactly would make it better. That's kind of the reason that open world games have been a lot more popular lately. Everybody's trying out a new sense of level design. And these old school Doom maps are just as much a part of the lineage and the history of that science of level design as they are modern in the sense that people still use these. Thank you very much for watching. If I've been able to help you at all, or if you think there were some points I could extrapolate on, please do comment below. Also, you will probably noticed that the channel has undergone a new theming, and it was that reason that the channel had died for a little bit. I apologize for that. I hope that all of you are still around. Have a nice day.